Let's begin with the first session of the day. Under Mr. Rajesh Gopinathan's leadership, TCS has established itself as the leading company in adopting digital and cloud transformation capabilities, and it continues to lead the industry on business transformation capabilities, making it one of the key beneficiaries of technology adoption demand tailwinds. Under Mr. Gopinathan's leadership, the market capitalization of the company has crossed $163.84 billion in August 2021, making TCS the most valuable company in India. It has posted a strong 11% dollar revenue CAGR over FY11 to FY21 and delivered industry-leading ROE of around 38% in FY21. With deal wins of around $33 billion over the last 4 quarters, the growth outlook for TCS remains highly supportive. A new report from Tata Consultancy Services and US Chamber of Commerce Foundation titled Technology as a Catalyst for Empowering Communities explores how technology can transform outcomes in various social sectors such as education, the future of work, healthcare, sustainability and disaster response, food security, diversity, equity and inclusion, the COVID-19 pandemic, digital divide, and mental health. TCS is a sparkling example of a futuristic organization, and Mr. Gopinathan's sharp and analytical mind and strong foresight has taken the company to unprecedented heights. More power to you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the CEO and MD of TCS, Mr. Rajesh Gopinathan. I would also like to welcome Mr. Ramdeo Agarwal, Chairman of Motilal Oswal, and Mr. Mukul Garg, Senior IT Analyst, for a fireside chat with Mr. Gopinathan. I would also request the audience to post their questions on the chat box, please. Over to you, Mr. Gopinathan.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think we should start. Good morning, viewers, and welcome to this conference. I'm really delighted. I was looking forward to talking to Rajesh on the beginning of this particular conference, and it'll be nice to have him and talk about the big picture of Indian IT, which is, let me just from top of my head, something like Indian IT at the beginning of the century was just about 1% of total corporate profits. Now it is more like 24-25% as of last year. So the importance of Indian IT in India's entire corporate culture has grown manyfold in last 21 years. And the march is actually, it has actually changed so many things, whether it is the Forex, whether it is the job situation, image of India all over the world. So in that situation, you are the flag bearer company of this particular industry, and you are the boss. So I thought, let me put some big picture questions to you. One of the things is that today the global GDP is about 90 trillion, and maybe 4% types would be the total tech spend. But every day in our life, everything is just becoming digital. Like even this conference suddenly has turned digital. So how do you see the tech spend? I mean, I can say that in last 15 years, global GDP has doubled at the rate of 5% in dollar terms, including inflation. Next 10, 15 years, if we think even in 20 years, if the world GDP has to go from 90 trillion to say 180, 190 trillion, how do you see the tech intensity to that next 90 trillion?
Thank you, Mr. Agrawal, and good morning to you and to all your viewers. First of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to all of you. It's a real pleasure. You have pretty much put the finger on the nail. It is about technology intensity. And if you look at industry after industry, the nature of value chain transformation that is happening, which is leveraged through technology, is significant. And never before has any single industry had such a cross industry impact as technology has had across our entire spectrum of end user industries. That's the reason why you've been also seeing this in the past, that as global GDP has been growing, typically technology spend has been growing at least 3-4 percentage points higher than where the global GDP growth rate has been. Another way of thinking about it is that broadly, technology spend used to be in the range of 1 to 3% of revenue across industries, leaving aside industry like, let's say, banking, where it used to be in the range of 8% plus. Now, if you think about it, in banking, a lot of the product feature set, differentiation, distribution used to be instantiated inside technology systems. And that's why the technology intensity used to be in the high single digits or even double digit in cases of some firms. Now, the same thing is happening across industries. You spoke about media. If you take media, the content creation, content distribution, content consumption, the entire value chain has been disrupted by technology. So in industry after industry, that norm of what that percentage of value comes from technology is significantly changing, and that gives that long-term visibility. It is difficult to put where it should be. I think few people have commented on saying that it is probably likely to be double of where it is today. But we don't have a crystal ball. All that we can say is that we are pointed in the right direction. Overall economic growth is expected. And within that, overall share increase of technology is expected. So that's what gives us the excitement and the confidence about the opportunity spectrum when we look forward.
Sir, one of the things is the relevance of Indian IT to the total technology spend worldwide, which is very unique. It's not, it's a services. It started with services. Even today, it is services. But it started with maybe staffing or low-end work, and then it started. The skill started going up, and the nature of the work started changing, and now it has reached to literally on top of the world in terms of even consulting and those kind of things. So how the relevance of Indian IT in next 5-10 years? It's not going to be same. The work which was being done 10 years back and what will be done in next year. So how Indian IT will evolve in this entire value chain progression of the global GDP?
So, let's, I'll exaggerate a few points just to emphasize something, but of course, it's a nuanced one. One way to think about it is that this classification of Indian IT versus non-Indian IT, I think is probably a decade or two old. Today, if you look at the total technology talent available in the universe, I'm not talking about future talent, the total technology talent at work in the global system, India by far enjoys the largest share. And at the rate at which it is growing, the majority of that could very soon end up in India. So the technology industry is broadly driven from India. And this is not the first time it has happened from a global economy perspective. Different industries at different points in time have been dominated by different geographical setups, right? So it has happened over the last couple of 100 years. Every time different industries have had different leadership side. India, we think of it as a country, but it's as big as, let's say, Europe in this context when we think about from an industry perspective. So I think we need to, as you said, 20 years ago, we were in a very nascent stage. This is 2021, we are in a very different stage. Our classifications need to probably adjust for that. That's one point. The second point is that the reason we are where we are today is because we were very diligent to capture the opportunity, position ourselves right, and build towards it. And while we enjoy a certain position, that does not automatically guarantee success, let's say 10 years out, unless we continue to be diligent to build out that new capability set. But the benefit is that today we are having access to those customers, we have access to the talent, and we have access to the financial resources, capital, the distribution network, that if we are diligent, we can actually keep on moving forward and make this momentum work for us. But our industry is a very, very unforgiving industry. If you don't stay, it is an industry that's always in dynamic equilibrium. If you keep pedaling, you will continue to do well. But if you try to stop, you're likely to fall off. And if you fall off, it's very difficult to get back on. So, yeah, so you got to stay, you got to ride it wave after wave. But that's the excitement of it.
Yeah. Some of the people are saying that Y2K brought India into the technology map of the world. That's the history. Between 95 to 2000, people started coming here for solving their double-digit problem or whatever. I think this time the reason is different. But again, I think the world is coming to India to get their online or whatever digital transformation, those things. And the opportunity size is much larger. The global economy itself is much bigger. Tech spend is even bigger. And relevance of India is really starkly right into that. So how do you see first thing is, has Indian industry moved from buyer's market to seller's market? In just about 12, 18 months, I think 1920 was a different year and 2021 is turning out to be a very different year. So has the tide turned from a buyer's market to seller's market fundamentally?
That depends on your philosophy and how you're trying to build out. So if you take it from a TCS perspective, we are very focused on what you said in the beginning, that the technology intensity of the value chain is increasing. And it is our intent and our aspiration to integrate ourselves very deeply into that value chain. And one aspect of that is, of course, relevance, innovation, investment, etc. But a key aspect of it also is the trust that you enjoy with your customers. So as customers, increasingly allow you to get deeply integrated with their value chain, you need to make sure that that trust is repaid. And one of the environments in which that trust gets tested out is situations of high demand like what we're going through currently, where our most valuable customers, we owe it to them to make sure that this volatility is absorbed by us rather than passed on to them. That's how the longer relationship builds. And we have done that in the past also. And many of our relationships are now multi-decadal old, and they have seen it go through ups and downs. And they have been supportive on both sides have been supportive when the shoe's on the other foot, as it were. So, which is why even when we went through the pandemic, the level of acceptance to what we were trying to do, and the trust with which they approached, the speed at which we switched over, was very critical to ensuring that we went through seamlessly. It was not an environment where they were very doubtful. And when an organization like ours does it, then that provides confidence to many people down the chain to emulate it and go through with it. So we should not underplay that the trust that we have earned over the years. And it's very important that we keep that. And that's how we are trying to build it out. So we don't see it as a buyer's or a seller's market. We think it's a market that is constantly increasing its need for our services. But we are suppliers and partners and strategic partners into that value chain. And we try to maintain that role always.
Mm-hmm. One of the thought processes that I think between 95 to 2000 in that bull run, it went 5x, but base was very small, barely $1 billion to $5 billion. And then McKinsey report came. There they said that by 2010 it could be 60 billion. I just couldn't believe it. I mean, that again climbing and bang on, they were, I think Indian IT did achieve that particular number. What I'm saying is that can we double? I mean, just about double in next 5-6 years at the industry level. Like we are doing about $150 billion of export. Do you see there is a good possibility? I mean, nobody knows the future, but still, do you see reasonably good 75-80% chance that we might hit 300 billion in next 5-6 years?
Whether we'll hit it in 5-6 years or we'll hit it in 8-10 years, difficult to say. But do we have visibility to be able to double it? Absolutely. Because, if you look at our client profile and the volume of work that we do with clients, can we double it? Absolutely. And are there more clients out there to be acquired? See, this industry is so fragmented that market share gains, consolidation, and then the overall expansion that we spoke about earlier. So doubling is not I think it's definitely the opportunities out there. Whether it is closer to 5 years or closer to 10 years, that is difficult to say. And we are only gearing ourselves to where we currently see the immediate opportunity.
But still, I think 5 year might be long, short, but still as per because the tide turned just 15, 17 months back in terms of growth, momentum. And is it still accelerating? Or, more clients are now, since pandemic is lowering down. So more clients are getting aligned to executing. And so is the growth momentum picking up? Or now, we have seen best of it and order cycle is going to. So what's your sense about the industry level that how you see at least the next 12 months, 18 months, 24 months in terms of industry shape up?
What is important is to understand where the demand acceleration came from and what's the longevity of that trend. So this shift to cloud, which got nudged by the pandemic, it is not that the technologies were new. The technologies have existed for quite some time with fairly good, proof of concepts that have been established. Large companies, very very credible solutions existed. But the nudge to make that switch was not coming through. What the volatility of the last year did was to put a value to the resilience that this new architecture offered. And therefore, it nudged people to start adopting the cloud. Even today, we are at early stages. We are less than, I would say, 1/4 of workloads that could potentially be on the cloud are currently on the cloud. And that too, and I'll come back to that. So the important thing is this shift is an architectural shift. Currently, what is happening is we think of it as a 3-tier approach. The first tier is to think about infrastructure resilience and infrastructure as a service. And the bulk of what we saw over the last few quarters is this adoption of that infrastructure value proposition. And that itself has got quite some headroom left to run. But the real business value, so resilience is important, but one more year of stable, let's assume there is no third wave and nothing major happens, the value of resilience will go down because it will go away from the immediate memory. So the real business value will come as we start exploiting the native capability of the architecture and starting to change our business models for that. And that is a more long-drawn process because the shift or to move your data center to a cloud is a much more well-defined process. What to do with the cloud capability will be a much more heterogeneous and it will take time to play out. But it will happen because once you've moved it, the threshold for experimentation goes down. So more and more experimentation will happen, more people will look at it, and there will be more diffusion of that. So the second wave will not be as intense as the first wave, but it will be much more powerful, but it will take time. And then the third wave is truly business model innovation across industries, which is even more uncertain, not uncertain in terms of whether it will happen or not, but how the speed at which it will play out will be very lumpy. Some people will make giant strides fast, others will take time to follow. So the speed of adoption of these 3 layers will change just because of the complexity of each of the layers. But what we have done, we have crossed a threshold which we will not cross back. So there will never be a situation where cloud is not part of the enterprise architecture. We are not in that flip-flop mode. We have crossed over. Now how it plays out, it will be a more thing. It will not be that everything that can happen in cloud will happen in the next few years. No, it will happen, but it will the current sugar rush of the infrastructure adoption that will taper down when the more mature demand cycle of the second horizon will come around, which is even more powerful, but will take its own time to unfold.
What I think is about the future of work. I mean, I think the last 15, 18 months have redefined the way we are used to working. And I mean, the productivity gains for the high-end workers have just exploded. So, Indian IT is a very headcount-driven model. So, does it give a new push to the scalability, possibility of Indian IT, what they can do, how many people can work, and it is not constrained by how many sitting space you have. Now, suddenly, your sitting capacity effectively has gone up. So, do you think this is going to really redefine the way Indian IT is going to serve the large clientele?
Our growth has not been constrained by seating capacity as an industry also, but the real constraint is, and neither has it been constrained in terms of access to raw talent, right? Because we are still benefiting from the demographic dividend of India, and which is where the real factor plays at work. The constraining factor is, can you hold it together, right? There is demand. Can you bring the customer and understand the customer well enough, find that solution, make sure that the talent that is available, you are able to invest in retraining and making them current with everything and carry it together rather than do it in one way. But are you able to build it in an internally sustainable model? So that is where the real, I would say, the differentiation between success and failure lies in. And so from that context, access to talent in a broader setup is not been the constraining factor. The talent has been there, and the Indian market is very, that people are very mobile. So it was not that you were constrained by talent availability in south or north or east or wherever. You could pretty much access a very large talent pool. The benefit that this brings in is it actually makes this talent pool a fungible pool, right? What we're calling as the talent cloud. So today, project execution has still been constrained by talent availability in the location where you actually instantiate the project. So a project is being executed from Mumbai versus a project is being executed from Chennai or Bangalore. And then the local teams are what is being actually optimized on. Whereas we'll be able to think about projects being executed in India so that the team can be all over the country, wherever that talent is available at that instance. When you bring inventory together, it improves better utilization, not just at a gross level, but also appropriate utilization of appropriate skill set. So it is not that the number of people getting billed is increasing, just that the right talent can be put differentially on the right work. So better leverage comes through. And that is the more powerful aspect of this work from home. And that's, I think it's a hugely powerful thing. But we'll have to make sure that our work practices, client interactions, all integrate this into this framework. And which is that vision that you laid out, saying 25 by 25, which think of it as a concept car that it is put out to test the boundaries of what people will accept or not accept. But the good news is that our client side acceptance and the people side acceptance has been very good. So whether we do 25 by 25 or we do 50 by 50, we definitely will not be 0-100. And we'll definitely not be 100-0 where we are currently, or 95-5. We are like 5% in office, 95% home. We will not be there, and we will not go back 100% to office. But over time, and it will not happen. We are not going to go from 95-5 to 50-50. We'll have to go back to the older models, and then in a very structured and more controlled way, we will shift to this kind of a hybrid working model. And that will be hugely positive. It will also, help from a social perspective also. It will actually allow people a much wider spectrum of how they want to participate in this workforce. So that will also make the availability, a richer talent pool will become available.
Do you think the world has become flatter? It was the flattening process was on for last 15, 20 years, thanks to digital, integration. But has it taken acceleration? So between Boston and Bangalore, has the flattening far more pronounced, and in the next decade it will be even more pronounced in terms of the flight of work. At least at entrepreneurial level, whomsoever I talk to, they are very delighted to shift a lot of small works to India. So and the quality of VC, quality of network, speed of transmission, telecom, and now the realization suddenly that yes, you can be as effective. So do you think this is a huge trend, which is, right now we can talk like a trend, but the real impact will be over a period of time? What's your thought on that?
My thought is that the world is a much more nuanced place. So while definitely that possibility exists, and the technology exists and everything is there, but the world will become much more connected, and probably less the nature of when the term was coined, the flat world. I think that is a very unidimensional view of what is likely. That dimension will exist, but it will be a more complex one. We will need to be relevant in every market and every community we operate in. And we will need to be fair and transparent in that. So you're already seeing pushbacks against the global digital champions, as it were. Today it is about, is profit being accumulated in one place? Tomorrow it will be, is opportunity being accumulated in one place? And in future, probably even IP accumulation in one place will not be tolerated. So a more equitable spread of resources and rewards is what we should be looking for from a sustainable operating model perspective. So in our case, it will be, so we'll be able to move work as long as we are keeping all stakeholders and being equitable to all stakeholders. The extraction kind of mindset will not survive when we think 10 years forward.
Okay.
Yeah. So Rajesh, I just wanted to follow up on the points which you mentioned. If you look at the world right now, or technology space right now, you have a world which is definitely a lot more volatile. You have the way technology is being delivered moving at a very, very rapid pace, and the tech itself, underlying requirements are changing. Keeping this in background, and the fact that TCS probably culture-wise has been one of the best companies in the Indian IT universe, with very low attrition, very, very long duration of employees staying at the organization. What do you think separates a winner in this ecosystem versus someone who will probably fall by the wayside? And I also want to throw in the equation that when you guys were scaling up, there were a lot of companies who were behemoths, from their point of view, and they now are either at the same size as you or have fallen by the wayside.
I think the important thing is, when we referred to it earlier in this discussion, of thinking of your people as assets and making sure that you are both valuing it and reinvesting in them to keep them current. So in the past, this industry has been approached more from a cost center mindset, that today's job, today's talent, link it up, put an envelope around it, maximize the value out of it, and then move on to the next opportunity and the next talent pool. And what that does is that over time, these become standard assets and they drag down the entire organization. So the approach that we need to take, and where our DNA and philosophy comes, is to ensure that we carry the organization with us rather than leaving stranded workforces behind, and making sure that training is made available to everybody, and that everybody is encouraged and supported to stay current with where the demand environment is. And even more importantly, valuing the knowledge base that gets built up through experience in each of these people, which we call contextual knowledge, and making sure that our solution delivery and the solution design leverages this knowledge base so that it is not just an asset, but it is a valuable asset. And the business model actually both recognizes and leverages that asset. If you do that, I think it is a very sustainable model. I've already spoken to you about our approach to customers. So rather than look at each customer transaction as a zero-sum game where you try to maximize in the given environment. So if you take a sustainable approach to customers, sustainable approach to your talent, sustainable approach to your wider stakeholder universe, I don't see why we should be, not participating in that future growth that we spoke about at the beginning.
Right. And also, if we look at the way technology is evolving, where do you see TCS, being 10 years down the line? Because if you look at the IT services industry right now, it is, it still has that whole thought process of, we need to have either a fixed price model, we need to have implementation, all that. Do you think the industry will evolve into a much more nuanced, much more autonomous kind of a space where you have your own platforms and products, you have people who are managing the client ecosystem end to end instead of different companies kind of hand-holding different parts of the work?
Our approach to it is that it's likely to remain heterogeneous. Okay, there will not be a single model, and we should remain flexible to adopt multiple models and scale the one that is doing well. So we don't pre-assume A model versus B model. Whether it is, let's say, at the one end of the spectrum, it is a pure capacity model, right? You're just providing talent. And the other end of the spectrum is an end-to-end platform model. And everything in between is also a real approach. The focus being that, which is a very key part of TCS, when you put the customer at the center and you realize that the customer needs all these models from its strategic supplier, because a customer is not going to turn around all its technology consumption to a platform-based model. Then there will be no differentiation left for them. Neither can they afford to have all their technology consumption on a custom-developed bespoke model, which would be cost prohibitive for them. So the customer requires a full heterogeneous spectrum. Now, when we have built our business, we have built it by trying to maximize wallet share at a customer level. So to maximize wallet share, we have invested in ensuring that we have a full portfolio of services. And the second aspect of having a full portfolio of services is that we should also have a full portfolio of engagement models without being predisposed to one or the other. And that will be the reality of the world. There will be business models which will choose one or the other and try to be best of breed in that. And they might or might not do well. But our approach, our strategy is to be focused on defined set of customers and to make sure that we maximize wallet share by providing a heterogeneity of services and a heterogeneity of engagement models.
Right. And if you look at the overall addressable market, you mentioned this in, I think earlier in the conversation, that the market is growing, and while it's very difficult to give a visibility on how large the market will be, but do you see that it's a reality right now, given what we have gone through in the last 2 years, that literally IT is eating into everything else, or technology is eating into everyone else's pie, and different functions which used to be done by different organizations or different verticals within the business are now being taken care by technology, and hence the pie itself is growing at a very, very rapid pace?
Absolutely, Mukul. So definitely that is happening. That is the percentage of technology leverage across functions is continuously increasing. Earlier, so the one way to think about it is, earlier technology used to be part of the SG&A spend because it was really a back office spend. A lot of the business consumer of tech used to be, let's say, the CFO or the CHRO. And, in the last couple of decades, the supply chain officer and so on and so forth. But what has happened, starting even more than 10 years back, 15 years back, technology has become more integrated into the cost of goods sold. So I gave the example of banking, where the actual product instantiation itself is on technology. So it's very much part of the cost of goods sold. If you take, and I spoke about media, right? In media, the entire cost of goods sold equation has shifted towards very much larger technology leverage. And you see this happening across industries. Manufacturing and automobiles is a classical example, where the percentage of technology cost inside the actual cost of the car is continuously going up. So this is the dynamic at play. And as it extends into the value chain, the stakeholder who is responsible for it keeps changing. The CIO continues to be a major stakeholder. In many cases, the CIO now is the procurement arm rather than the consuming arm. Earlier, the CIO was both the procurement arm and the consuming arm. Today, maybe procurement arm, consumption is through somebody else. In future, some other aspects of services will be procured and consumed by different aspects of the organization. So it increases the extent of interaction in that client universe.
Right. So, if you look at the environment, and, earlier you mentioned that, maybe in next 5 to 10 years, the overall market will be a lot larger than where it is right now. But it's also a reality that TCS continues to grow or outgrow the overall market. So what's your aspiration, or how do you see TCS growing its market share in the overall picture? Because it's not just the market which is growing, it's also that consolidation is happening, because as you said very rightly that it's a very, very fragmented market. It's also the fact that there is going to be a scenario where people who are relatively early in the cycle and who have invested ahead of others will keep on gaining share. So, if you look at next 5 to 10 years, where do you see TCS as overall part of the market? And if I have to just put it in, at what level do you think you will be disappointed?
See, the definition of market is actually defined by people like you. We are more focused on what we address directly rather than because there's a wide range of how you define what the market is. Our bigger focus is, are we the preferred strategic vendor to the customers that we address? And is the number of customers increasing at a rate which is significant and better than whatever is the overall growth rate in the industry? So as long as we are growing our base of customers, and as long as we are ensuring that the number of customers for whom we are their preferred strategic vendor keeps on increasing, I think we'll be very happy. Our what should I say? Red flags will start going up if we start losing relevance in our customers. That in a customer where we used to be a strategic vendor, where we used to be their primary go-to partner, if that relationship is taken over by somebody else, that is when our red flags will work. And we are very focused on that. The aggregate market and market size, etc., that depends on where you draw the boundary, which is outside our control. But we are very much more micro-focused at the customer level.
Right. The other end of the equation is the supply side, where we have seen, at least in last few months, a lot of media articles talking about massive increase in salaries when people are moving from organization A to B to C. So, do you think this is more of a transient phase where we have suddenly seen a very significant jump in demand, and hence the demand for talent has gone up, or do you think this this era, which probably has come in after a long time, where talent demand is growing at a very rapid pace, will sustain for some more time?
No, I do believe it is a transient one. So overall demand for talent will keep going up, but the kind of intensity that we are seeing today is a transient one. if you go back to if you map hiring trends over the last few years, you would have seen that there was a significant reduction in hiring trend as the overall growth environment was also slowly declining. And then during the pandemic time, very few people actively hired. Right? So there is this, when the demand has come, there is this sudden surge. Everybody wants to have people, and not everybody invested in maintaining that capacity in the leaner types. And that is what is causing this current surge. So there is a real demand spike. But the intensity that we see on the talent pressure is because people didn't invest ahead. And the opposite will happen now, because everybody will invest and the talent pool availability is quite high. The entry-level talent, 3 years back when we started our what we call TCS National Qualifier Test, 250,000 people applied for it, and we recruited about 35,000 people. Today, when we are conducting the test, more than 4 lakh people are applying for it. So the sheer, number of people who are, it's not reducing. It's not that we are still on 2 lakh and we want to now hire, let's say 50,000 plus. The base itself has expanded. So that the inflow capacity is quite high. Do you have trained, ready people to deploy? Many companies don't have. And that is where you're seeing the spike. So in the process, there will be some amount of cost pressures. There will be that phase to be gone through. But I feel that after this has gone a few more quarters, it will become much more steady as the longer term cycles kick in.
Right. And, maybe another angle to look at this is you are going to see a very, very significant inflow of fresher into the ecosystem because everyone will hire more and more from colleges. Now, at the same time, you are seeing the underlying technology being a lot more evolved than what it used to be in past. If you go back to that mid 2000 era, the requirements were a lot more simpler. So, are you actually seeing the supply being a lot more nuanced, a lot more learned than what it was at that time, or will there be some transition period where these guys will train and hence they will probably take a year or two before they become really kind of applicable from a client environment point of view?
Now we have a very fundamental difference of opinion on this, and it's a big area where TCS differs. The issue is, taking your own example, if you look at the early part of 2000, right? The complexity of technology today has significantly reduced compared to what it was 15 years ago. So it is actually the other way around. It is just that there is a lot more heterogeneity. There is a lot more of awareness. The brand names sound much more, what should I say, more distributed, much more colorful. But the actual technology complexity has significantly reduced compared to where it was. Even more importantly, the learnability of the technology has significantly increased. With every generation of technology, actually technology becomes easier to master rather than more difficult to master. So that's why the availability of the talent will also keep on increasing. What you need is to deal with the heterogeneity. You need the right training infrastructure, because the same thing has 10 different flavors, or instead of 2-3 different technologies, now there are 15 different technologies. But the learnability factor has significantly increased because the complexity has come down. And that is a very fundamental belief that TCS has. So, a lot of the market commentary used to be, why are you not doing acquisition to acquire digital talent? We say, no, we don't need to acquire to get digital talent for 2 reasons. One is we believe that we'll be able to train that much better than anybody else will be. And 2, why will somebody else actually have more talent than we already have or that we can do? Because they were not sitting on the shelf for it. So when the demand comes, it's not going to come. So this is a very fundamental belief that TCS has. that technology complexity is reducing. You need to invest in training, and it is much more easier to train than to try and buy. So you will see us consistently staying true to this philosophy, and it has paid rich dividends to us.
So I think that was a very interesting point which you mentioned, that instead of buying, you want to develop the talent in-house, and at the same time, you mentioned that the requirement of technology has evolved because there are so many different technologies out in the play in the market right now. Does that mean that there will be a slight lag at which TCS will attack them, and I would assume attack them very aggressively, versus some of the other peers who just want to buy out, and they have been buying out very regularly and trying to be the early adopters and early leaders in the space?
Let me ask you this: if there is heterogeneity, why will somebody else have that talent? And if you buy out somebody with 100 people or 150 people, 200 people, why will it make a big difference to you compared to what it takes to train 2,000 people or 5,000 people? So that logic is a investment banker logic, because it tries to bring in a deal into play. But the fact is, everybody is starting from ground zero on the new technology. And this heterogeneity of technologies also has as much to do with branding as it has to do with true heterogeneity. Because many of very adjacent technologies also have very distinct brand names, and therefore they tend to masquerade as distinct technologies, but they are not. Underlying principles are similar, underlying uses are similar, and therefore we are not out in the market looking for exactly X person trained on X technology. We believe that we can satisfy that with a much wider pool.
Right. And another way or another, I think part of the overall demand environment is the deal size. We have gone through eras where there used to be $1 billion deals, 10-year in duration in past, and they kept on shrinking into smaller deals. Then there was an era where everybody used to talk about small deals when this was scaling up. In last 1.5 years, we have again seen deal sizes go larger versus what they were before. Do you think this is again something where we are going through a change, and hence deal sizes are becoming larger before they normalize, or do you expect this to continue?
Deal sizes are likely to stay big on certain types of deals. So if you go back to, to take our own example over the last 10 years, we were pioneers in stitching together large, complex deals. And that market at that time was very attractive because there were very few people, both with the credibility as well as an appetite to execute those kind of deals. Over time, this has become better understood, both by the competitive universe as well as by the various advisors and third parties who participate in it. So there is greater acceptance to stitching together larger deals and a better understanding of what it takes. So it has become a more competitive field, and the participation is also increased significantly. So it was a very attractive, low competition field. Today it is a much more competitive intensity is higher. But will it continue? It will keep continuing till the marginal return on that becomes negative. In the sense that today, when a third party accumulates that deal, they are looking for significant reduction on the price. And at some point in time, that will turn negative. And at that time, its attractiveness will go down. But when will that happen? Difficult to say. But it's no longer as attractive a field as it used to be, let's say, a decade back.
We'll probably take a couple of questions from the audience. One of the questions which I think is quite common and has come in from a number of people is on attrition and talent crunch. If you see, there is a fair bit of talent crunch and increase in attrition across the industry. Is this something which you see more as a near-term to medium-term trend, or is this something which will go on for far longer? And if the later, then what steps can be taken to manage this high attrition environment versus the demand which is coming in?
I think we answered the longer term one earlier, but I'll repeat it. So, as I said, it's a manifestation of the lack of investment in entry-level talent over the last few years by a wider set of players in this industry. And therefore, we think it's a more transient one, and it will reduce. The intensity will reduce. It always will be attrition, but the current intensity will reduce in a few quarters. And it has two parts to it also. One is as everybody starts, hiring in the pipeline. It's a classic supply chain problem that you didn't order your upstream supply, and suddenly demand spikes, and then you start over ordering on your upstream, and by then the demand is the. The second aspect of it is that a lot of mid-tier talent that is currently rotating, they will also start figuring out, it's very easy to see what you gained in this movement vis-a-vis what you lost. What you lost becomes more apparent a year into the new job. So that also brings an automatic dampener into this over time. And both aspects will play out. That the demand from many players will start moderating for the middle, and the propensity for people to move also will moderate. And we are much more steady in both our hiring and our people management policies, and that will play through. And we are currently staying very focused on it. But on the short term, we are making sure that tactically we are also responding to the market. And that has its own implications. There are some which will come through on the cost side, but that's more a tactical response rather than a change approach to talent.
Right. Another question which has come in is on the mega trends. So cloud obviously is out there, but then at the same time, cybersecurity is also coming up very, very rapidly given the number of disruptions and hacking we are seeing in the cloud environment. Customer experience continues to remain one of the key focus areas, especially in last few years. So if you can comment on where do you see, bigger opportunity, where do you see TCS actually doing better and focusing a lot more versus the others? If you can just give us your thoughts on that.
See, we differentiate cloud versus the others because cloud, as I said, is an architectural shift. The others are logical progression. So whether it is security as a functionality and the great enhanced requirement on security, or it is customer experience, which is a logical progression of where as technology becomes more customer facing. So cloud is a much more structural shift, and that has got a lot more weight in the overall demand environment than the others, and that's how we are approaching it. But I think the differentiation that we have is not so much in choosing is security going to be the key or is customer experience going to be the key. The difference in our approach is what I explained earlier also, to take a holistic view of a customer's total requirement and to position ourselves as a strategic provider across their heterogeneous needs rather than focus on one trend and try to be best of breed in that. And there we are quite unique, and our entire organization structure strategy is aligned to this philosophy, and that has been the hallmark of our performance, and that will continue to stay true into the foreseeable future.
Right. Another, I think the other question which is out there is, when you look at large deals which are coming up, invariably most of them involved some bit of rebadging element into it. Do you think this will continue, or will the deals enter a stage where you don't need to rebadge that many people, but the capability itself will carry the day in terms of deal size? And how do you think in terms of the future of large deals going forward?
As I said, this definition of large deal is a bit of a moving boundary. So what is the future of large deal depends on what the large deal is. The large deal of today is different from the large deal of 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was large in scope, not just in volume. Today, it is more about volume than scope when you look at the number of deals that are out there. But I would say this, that customers look to us to be better managers of talent than they are. And that's one of the big value propositions that we have. So that will also include their existing talent pools. They look to us because they see that in a very fast evolving market, dynamic demand environment, we are a reliable strategic partner who can manage that talent more effectively for them. And definitely some of them will choose to hand over some of their own talent to us to be able to integrate that with that global chain. And you've seen that in some of the deals that we have done, for example, with Deutsche Bank or with Prudential America. And that feature will continue. That's part of our value proposition because we do believe that we are optimized for maximizing human talent potential.
Right. I think one question which we addressed earlier also, where you said like, you're not going to focus purely on product or services, and you would like to run a more heterogeneous environment. Generally, do you see, the future being more product-led versus where it has been in past because of the platforms which are coming in? And, the consequent correlation to that will be the non-linearity, the long hope non-linearity between the employees and the revenues in the system kind of becoming more manageable. How do you see this going forward? Because, if you look at the history of Indian IT in the last 20 years, that's one correlation which we have not been able to break out of.
We'll be careful in answering it, but it's back to what Mr. Ramdev said in the beginning. Yeah. This long hope for non-linearity has existed for 20 years or 25. At that time, we were 1% of corporate profits. Today, we are 22% of corporate profits. So sometimes you shouldn't, a lot of the analytical underpinnings are based on historical assessments. So what is more important is to see where the opportunity is and to manage the opportunity in front of you rather than look for whether analysts will, accept it. So non-linearity in itself is not an end goal that we seek when we look at opportunity. What we look for opportunity is that, can we manage this opportunity sustainably? And a lot of what I've said so far, as I said, sustainability from a client perspective, sustainability from our talent perspective, from an overall operating environment perspective, those are what's more important. Otherwise, this dialogue has been had when we were less than 500 million in size, and we are having the same question when we are 23 billion in size. There's no right answer for it. It is, people will have their perspective. We need to play the ball that's in front of us rather than to worry about the commentators.
Okay, I think we are completely run out of time. Rajesh, thanks a lot for taking the time to speak with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thanks.
My pleasure.